And I would like to invite to join the stage the moderator of Fireside Chat, Mary Child, senior reporter at Barron's and award-winning financial journalist, and an amazing entrepreneur who succeeded to lead her company, Cardlytics, on 5th best entrepreneurial company for entrepreneurs and magazine, and who has tremendous passion around helping women excel in the workplace, and has led a number of developments in mentoring initiatives. And I'm sure she will tell us a little bit more about that. Please welcome Lynn Loeb, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder Cardlytics. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Lynn. This is very exciting. So Lynn Loeb is the COO and co-founder of Cardlytics, which helps companies target marketing and measure the impact of that marketing as well. And I'm so excited to hear your perspective, too, because I love hearing the kind of diversity and inclusion aspect, but from someone who's a co-founder of a company, how you build that in from day one, if at all possible. Yep. You know, these two things can work in concert, and so I'm very excited to hear that perspective. And we will do a Q&A towards the end, so if you have questions, please hold on to them. They'll be coming around with the mic. So first, can you just tell us a little bit about Cardlytics, what it does, and why you started the company?
Yeah, so Cardlytics is a data and analytics platform. It's a platform built to serve marketers. The foundation of our platform is consumer transaction data. So we partner with banks, and we get access to every single customer's transactions. I probably know where and how most of you spend your money. We use that data to help marketers find better audiences of people and bring really relevant marketing to them. There's no better predictor of what you're going to buy in the future than by understanding what you buy in the past. And I, of course, see that. We see over $2.4 trillion of purchase data a year. The other important thing that we do for marketers is we sort of close the loop. So consumers' eyeballs have all gone digital, but yet 92% of purchases are still made in stores. So we help marketers understand, is their digital advertising actually driving purchases in the store, because we see all of the transaction data to really close that loop for them. To try to make it real, how many of you bank with Chase, as an example? So we are Chase Offers. Go use it. How many of you bank with Bank of America? We're Bank AmeriDeals, as an example. Go use it. I won't keep asking questions, but we work with most of the large banks in the country to really bring this innovative marketing platform to their customers. And from a customer perspective, we help you save money. We take the advertising dollars and we take some of that and actually convert it into an incentive for you to save money on the types of things that we're advertising to you. And that money is automatically deposited to your bank account. So we really have created not just a company, but we've created an industry. And lots of people thought we were crazy 10 years ago when we had this idea, but you fast forward to today, and most of the major banks, not just in this country, but actually in a lot of the European countries as well, work with us on this initiative.
Wow. I just used one of your discounts offers like 2 days ago.
Yay!
So thank you for that.
Makes me happy.
Looking forward to my 15% coming right back. So you mentioned that you started this a decade ago, and that was a very different era already with respect to what we're talking about today. I can only imagine that trying to raise like venture funding at the time was bananas. As a woman, I mean, in general, it's always bananas, but like especially as a woman. So can you tell me what that was like, what you learned from that experience?
Yeah, so I do want to echo what the panel said. I think we have come a long way for women equality and gender diversity, but we still have a very long way to go. So I will just tell you about my personal experiences. 10 years ago, well, we raised over $240 million before we actually became a public company about a year ago and rang the bell here at Nasdaq. And in raising that $240 million, I probably had to pitch my company and my idea to, I'm going to guesstimate 120, maybe, venture capitalists. In that 120 different meetings that I had over the course of a decade, I want you guys to guess how many times I walked into the meeting and saw a single woman sitting there. I can tell you it was one time, because I was so shocked at that one time that I couldn't even really figure out why I was shocked when I first walked in. And then I realized there is someone in here who looks like me, and that was super exciting. But there is a real need. I do think that women are making a lot of presence on corporate boards at sort of the corporate America level, but when it comes to women building their own companies, there's very few who do that. And I think one of the root causes is most of the people who are funding these companies are men, and white men. And it's really hard to walk into a room and pitch not just your idea, but your whole sort of way of, it's your idea, it's your baby, it's your company, to a room of white men. And I was joking with Mary earlier, I had this thing called my smart glasses. And I always knew I was gonna walk into a room of white men, and I do sometimes look like, well, 10 years ago I looked a lot younger, let me just tell you that. You get a lot of gray hair when you build your own company. But when I looked younger, 10 years ago, I would wear my smart glasses. And I would only wear black because I was doing anything I could to try and look more like them and blend in more like them. So we do have, I think, a long way to go. I will tell you, if you fast forward to today, some of our early venture capitalist backers now have a number of female companies that they've backed. I do a lot of speaking with those women and for them on their behalf. So they're making a lot of strides too, but there are still plenty of places where gender equality just has not even really begun to penetrate the way it really needs to.
Wow, that's I love the smart glasses. I think I'm going to adopt that personally, because we were talking in the kind of prep call before this about like I've been following, as I'm sure all of you have, the Elizabeth Holmes thing and how she used to manipulate her voice lower. And I'm like, that's a great idea. No wonder she got funding. Like, good idea. So I want to talk about some of the ways in which you've incorporated this into your company. This idea that, diversity, inclusion, these are fundamental things that you want to weave into the very fabric of that company. And I know Women of Cardlytics is a really big deal within the company. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so Women of Cardlytics is a women organization inside Cardlytics. Most companies have, or not most, but many companies have a very similar organization. I felt it was critical, obviously, for me to build and have something like that in my own company because I am a woman, and there are, not as many women founders as you would like, as we just discussed. So I felt it was really important to build that in from day one. But I want to tell you guys a story about that. So I'm the founder of the company. I was very supportive of having a women's, network in our company. We had our very first meeting back in 2009. The company was founded in 2008, so we had about 40 employees in 2009. And we had the very first Women of Cardlytics meeting. 3 women showed up. And when the 3 women showed up, there were men who thought this was a joke. They thought it was funny. There were men who lobbied outside of the conference room. Again, 40 people. We had a glass conference room. And they had a sign saying, "Handsome Men of Cardlytics." And they were walking around. They were making a joke of it. And then I went to the other women in the company, and I said, "Why didn't you come?" And they said, "Because I was scared." Right? They didn't want to come. In a woman-found company, the woman who's building and leading the company, they didn't know if it was going to be okay for them to come to a women's event and what their male coworkers would think of them. So I do think we've come a long way, but I do think that it's so important for those women who have made a success of their career and actually made it to the top, like the women who are on the panel, maybe me. We have to do something. Like it is not just, it's a responsibility to do something, because if we want this to change, it's got to start with us. And that's why I feel so passionate about Women of Cardlytics. It's why I got up at the crack of dawn this morning. I'm not going to get home till late last night or tonight, but I really wanted to be here because if the women who've gotten to the top aren't talking about it, then nobody else is going to either.
That's amazing, and that's a crazy story. Can you talk a little bit?
Believe me, those men got a talking to.
Right, I was going to say, did you fire them?
I did not fire them because it was a learning opportunity for them. But they honestly, they're all good guys. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't mean anything by it, but yet, oh my God, you just want to smack them.
You're so much more generous than I am. I wonder, that leads me to a question, because it's something that I struggle with, is how do you talk about this stuff with people who aren't where you are, right? Where when you hear something and you're like, oh, that's sexist and you don't know it yet, or hey, that's racist and you don't know it yet. And it's a journey, of course, and you want to meet them where they are and not alienate them and shut them down. Right. But how do you have that conversation?
No, that's so important. We can't alienate people as we go on this journey, because if you do that, what's going to happen is it's going to backfire. I mean, sometimes I get a little worried about the Me Too movement, because I have heard a lot of men say, I'm now afraid to have lunch with a woman, and God only knows I'm not going to have dinner with her. And that is going to hurt us because guess what? Men have dinner with men all the time. So we have to be careful, and I'm not saying that the Me Too movement is bad, I want to be clear, but we just have to be really careful. This is about bringing men into the conversation. And when they come into the conversation, they are going to say something that on the surface feels stupid or feels like something you shouldn't say. Because they don't know, because they're learning. Just like we don't know when we're going into a room of all, in my case, maybe if I go into a room with all Indian people or all Asian people, I will say something stupid, I'm sure, because I don't know. And so we can't make people feel bad when they do that. We have to bring them into the conversation, and we have to help them learn in a way that is not threatening, embarrassing, demeaning to them, no matter who you are. And you go back to that sort of women of Cardlytics example. Well, I was super annoyed with those men. They all still worked there for many years after. I talked to each of them individually, and I said, let me help you understand how that felt, right? But you can't alienate them, or it's going to backfire on us.
That's, I think you're probably correct in much of that. It bothers me because it puts the burden back on us,
Yep,
on people
absolutely.
of color, on women to do all this work and do a lot of hand holding. But at the same time, I kind of feel the same way. I don't really know how else to do it.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of the same Me Too backlash, and it's extremely aggravating because especially they'll be like, oh, I can't have dinners with women anymore. And I'm like, oh, well, that must be great because all your dinners must be free now because I'm sure you're doing the exact same policy with the men that you're mentoring. You don't have any dinners anymore.
Yeah.
No one responds right to that.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. So why does this matter so much to you? I mean, we've heard a little bit about the business case, and I want you to kind of unpack that a little bit more from your perspective as well. Why this is so important to emphasize to make sure that women excel in your company and people of color and et cetera.
Look, it's all about diversity. I don't care if it's women, men, people of color, people of different sexual orientation. It's all about diversity. And the reason it matters is because you cannot innovate if everybody in the room thinks the same. All of the entrepreneurism that's happening in this country, all of the disruption that's happening, when you think about the Amazons of the world, and you think about the fact that I have access to how you guys spend your money through productive partnerships with banks that would not have happened 10 years ago. There is disruption happening everywhere. There is no way that you can build a company and have truly innovative ideas, people, innovative things happening in a company if everyone comes from the exact same background and perspective. It's impossible. So it is common, it just makes it's business sense. This is really pure capitalism at its finest to make sure that we have true diversity across the board. Otherwise, you're never going to innovate. You're never going to innovate. And that's why it's important. To me, it's just you can put a business case behind this as easily as you can put a business case behind, am I going to go sign the $2 million contract with, Tony's next door or whatever it might be.
Could be. That
Yeah.
looks
Could be.
fertile ground.
Yeah, he could be an advertiser in our chat planner.
So how do you foster that environment? Obviously, it's talking to those men outside with their little pickets. That's great. But how do you, aside from these bilateral conversations, how do you make things feel safe and make the environment conducive to that?
Yeah. I think it's different in every company. I was listening to some of the policies that some of the larger companies up here have, and I was like, some of those are fantastic, and I want to take them back, and some of those would not work in a smaller company just because of the nature of how companies work. So I think it's different in every company, and I think that's the important thing. You have to understand the audience that you have, and then you have to figure out what is the right way to really get this audience engaged and motivated into the conversation. So at Cardlytics, most of our activities around anything that is not pure work is employee-led. So we have Women of Cardlytics, we have health and fitness, we have our own band called the Redeemers, we have a brewing club, we have because when you redeem an offer, for those of you who've ever used our program.
That's great.
I could go on and on with the things that we have, but they're all led by employees who are bringing their own passions in from the outside. Because the reality is we spend most of our waking hours at work. Think about that for a minute. You will spend most of your adult life waking hours at work. So if you can't bring what you love and what you're passionate about from outside work in, you're going to be miserable. And also, if you can bring what you love from outside work in, then you have more diversity by definition, because I don't brew beer, but we've got a bunch of people who do, and guess what? It's actually a really scientific kind of thing to brew beer. And so, you know, you end up learning about, they actually literally take some of their beer brewing tips and bring it into meetings about how can we figure out how to manipulate this data differently. Like, it's, you know, so I think that's the way that you do it, is you really let employees bring their passions into the work environment and make it work for them, and then you can have good conversations about anything, even though it's difficult, because people want to be there. At least that's how we do it at Cardlytics. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of best practices that you've learned, that like tips for people, practical things like we were talking about that you can just take into the workplace tomorrow? Starting these groups, employee-led groups, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Not picketing meetings, that's another great idea. Are there any other kind of off the top of your head?
I mean, there's so many ideas. I just really think it's, like I said, it's about really just letting people be people at work. Like, you can't be different at work than you are at home, or if you are, you're not going to be happy long term, and you're not going to bring your best thinking, and we're not going to have diversity, because, you know, so I just think that's the key, is let people be who they are at work just as much as they can be who they are at home.
That's great. You already kind of talked a little bit about why women are so underrepresented as entrepreneurs, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, from the funding perspective, you know, women had been less represented and still are. Where else do you see that manifest? Like, how does that show up as an entrepreneur? Did you run into obstacles you didn't expect, or did people, was it an expectations question?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny, there was a segment on CNBC today, I don't know if any of you guys saw it, talking about venture-backed, you know, PE firms and venture capitalist firms, and how only 10% of the senior employees, the employees who are actually responsible for figuring out who they're going to write a check to, only 10% of those are women. And that's today, so I'm sure 10 years ago when I was doing this, it was less than that. So I do think you have to start with making sure that the few women who are in any position anywhere, that it is, like I said, it is our responsibility. You have no choice. If you're a senior woman somewhere, it is your responsibility to figure out how to bring more diversity and more inclusion into your organization, whatever it might be. I think that's really important. And then in terms of, you know, lessons learned and why there aren't more, I do think you have to take risks. There was a question earlier about what advice would you give to women, and in some ways that's so cliche. Everybody gets asked that all the time, and you could say one thing or you could say 800 million things. But I do think, whether you like it or not, if you want to be a senior non-white male in an organization, you have to be willing to take more risks, because there aren't as many of you. And it is your job to be the voice for all the rest of you kind of in that organization. Whether you like it or not, that is your job. And so that is the responsibility you accept as being a senior person who doesn't look maybe, or who looks different than other senior person around you.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny because it's just, I believe you and I think you're right, and you're creating so much more work for all of us. But maybe you didn't create it, sorry. To be fair.
I'm just telling you how it is.
Yeah, you're just highlighting it. I have so much work. But I like that. One of the things that I always think about, I think this is, everybody probably already knows this in this room, but the Obama White House women felt like they weren't being heard, and they were getting really annoyed about it. And I'm really paraphrasing the story, so forgive me if you know it better than I do. And so they kept being talked over, and they were like, why is this, no one's ever hearing what I'm saying. And so they kind of banded together, and like, if you said something, I would be like, wow, you know, I just feel like Lynn had the best point. I just really wanted to amplify what Lynn said. And then they magically became more heard. So there's this, like, I don't know, they're writing articles now about the cliques in Congress, which I find that so cute, but that's one of the ways that, you know, you have to keep it front of mind and consciously go out of your way, like you're saying.
Yeah, you do. It's women's jobs to elevate other women, and it's, you know, just like it's, you know, an Asian person's job to elevate other Asians. I mean, it's just part of what we have to do.
And across all of that, absolutely.
Across any sort of diverse category,
So I know you said this was a cliche question, but I'm going for it. What
it.
advice would you give to other women to succeed?
Yeah, let me take that advice as an entrepreneur, because I'm actually more passionate about being an entrepreneur than I am a woman. I just happen to be a woman entrepreneur. So for any of you entrepreneurs in the room, the first piece of advice I would give you is no one is going to believe in your idea like you do, because that is by definition what an entrepreneur is, right? Everybody told us we were crazy when we said we're going to march into banks, we're going to get access to all their customers, we're going to get access to all their data, and we're going to start advertising through banks. I got kicked out of every single bank in this country, and actually several in Europe too. So no one's going to believe in your idea like you do, but you have to know when you've got to pivot. And that's the single biggest mistake I think most entrepreneurs make, is you so believe in your idea because no one else does, right? But you don't know when and how to pivot and when to let go of certain parts of it, and that's why so many entrepreneurs fail. I don't know, there's no secret answer to tell you exactly how to do that, but just know what you have to do every day is say, is this a moment where I need to pivot, or do I need to stay course? Because the initial idea usually does have to take a pretty dramatic pivot over time before it is fully baked and ready to go. The second piece of advice I would give to pending entrepreneurs is whatever amount of money you think you need, take that, multiply it by 10, and you might be close. You might be close at that point. But I'm very serious about that. It does usually take a lot more money than you think, and that is also one of the biggest reasons that small companies or venture-backed companies fail, is they actually run out of money before they can fully get that idea exactly right. And so just really think about that before you start a company.
And wear your smart glasses.
And wear your smart glasses.
That's good.
I didn't wear them today. I didn't need to.
You look smart anyway, so it's a safe room. Does anyone have any questions? Do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah.
So as a relatively new entrepreneur.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I left very senior roles after 20 years in financial services.
Yes.
And
I did the same thing, by the way.
So very excited to do that.
Yep.
But one of the questions, and I was going to ask it to the other panel, but I'll ask it to you. There's an issue because you have 1,800 new businesses started
Yep.
by women a day.
Yep.
5 times faster growth
Yep.
than men.
Yep.
How do we keep women in the workforce versus everybody just pivots and leaves? Because
Yep.
generationally, I'm a Gen Xer.
Yep.
The Gen Zs and the millennials are much easier to say, I'm going to try something new. So how
Yeah.
do we create practices?
Yeah.
And you're an entrepreneur, but now you have a developed company.
Right. I've
Right?
got 440 people I need to keep. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Right.
women in particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you
Yeah.
think companies should look at investing in their women in a different way to keep them in the workforce?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Let me spin that question slightly differently. Another possible piece of advice I could have given women is don't quit. And when I say don't quit, I literally mean don't quit your job. That's what I literally mean. Too many women just sort of give up. You either, it often happens when we have babies. I'm going to be real here, right? You have a baby and you just sort of go, this is hard, so I'm going to give up. But sometimes you just quit because you have a male boss and he's a real jerk, and instead of trying to do something about it, you say, I'm just going to take a pivot and I'm going to go start another company, or I'm going to quit in some other way. And so I do think we have to make sure that we help women and recognize when they're at that point where they want to quit for whatever reason, and reach out to them and sort of try to engage them. And I like I said, I do think it often happens when they're at childbearing age, or you can see it when they have either a boss or a coworker who you can see is driving them crazy, right? And you can see it, and when that happens, how do you reach out and how do you sort of help them? But the other thing I would say is, and this is the real problem, yes, women are starting businesses at a much faster clip than men, but they're not getting money. The money is still going to all the men. And I think it's because women don't actually know, for whatever reason, how to access that money, probably because it's still predominantly white men who are in charge of it. And so we need to do more to teach women about how do you actually go raise money. I literally sit down with women entrepreneurs and I say, show me your pitch deck. And I take a pen and I go, no, 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 and so we have to, it's a skill, but it's not a skill that is, there's very, like I haven't seen lately, but I don't think there's a lot of college university classes on how do you raise money from venture capitalists. So we've got to teach more of that. And again, it's why it's incumbent on women who have successfully raised money need to help other women understand, how do you do this? What do you say? What don't you say? What you don't say is almost as important as what you do say. And so we have to do, more of that. That's what I would say.
Just to piggyback on that real quick, that's like a great way too that dudes can help. I know we have a slight slant in the audience in terms of a gender split, but but I feel like that is a good, and for women entrepreneurs, it's obnoxious, but like it again puts it on you, but you can also ask and not be embarrassed to ask because you know the dude entrepreneurs are asking.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
Other questions? Yeah.
Thanks. I was wondering, on the topic of women who, you were saying, have a child, find it's all a bit hard and quit, and reaching out to those people, do you think there's an imperative to kind of broaden that conversation from just the employer to the woman to everybody else in that workforce to start really understanding, like, why is it hard when the woman has the baby? And what can we do culturally to make that a bit less hard?
Yes.
And how can we start, from your position of leadership, how are you guys approaching that at your company on a cultural level?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. We have a fairly young workforce, and so a lot of our women, we're having a lot of babies at Cardlytics. And I have had so many men come to me and ask questions that, again, don't laugh. Should I acknowledge she's pregnant? What do I do when she's pumping breast milk? Like when I know she has to take more breaks to pump breast milk, how do I have that conversation? I have men employees who would like a private woman's room, but a man's room, because we have a woman's room, so why can't we have a man's room, right? I mean, I know, think about these questions. They are all very, very real, very sincere questions. So absolutely, we have to teach. It's not just about the woman is having the baby, but first of all, there's a dad somewhere, unless somebody's invented a way to not make that happen. There's a dad somewhere who's having, similar or, going through that same change in their life, right? And then there's all these people around who are trying to figure out, how do I deal with the fact that you now, have to get up from a meeting to throw up in a trash can, which I had to do a lot of times when I was pregnant, right? And so yes, you have to figure out how to, it's all about making everyone feel comfortable asking the questions, understanding each other, even though it's going to be awkward. I mean, I guess the one thing, and I'll end with this, men and women are different. Like, sometimes I think what we've done is we've tried to, when women have gone into the workforce, we've tried to be like men and act like men. And the reality is we are different, and that's okay. So there are things men are better at than we are. There are things we are better at than men are. That is just the way it is. So let's talk about that openly. Women have babies, men don't. Let's talk about that kind of stuff openly, even if it's awkward, even if it's uncomfortable, even if somebody says something that is technically racist or stupid or sexist or whatever it might be. Many people are still coming from the right place, they just don't know how to do it. So we have to start having these conversations.
I also just want to interject a tiny thing. I noticed on the earlier panel, you said parental leave. You were very careful to say parental leave instead of maternity leave, or that's huge. Because then you're decentering. It's not just a woman's experience, it's a family experience. And to gender it and to put it entirely on half of the population makes absolutely no sense in this day and age, and actually is mean to all the dads out there. So, which there are plenty. So that would be I think we have to wrap it up, but this has been super fun. Thank you so much. This has been really enlightening. I've really enjoyed talking.
It was awesome.
Thank you.